Very often people post photos of snake skins and then they want to know what kind of snake it was and if it was dangerous. Now, if we get just a piece like this, it's very difficult for us to identify the snake from. So we need other pieces, and today I'm going to explain why we need certain pieces of skin to be able to tell you what kind of snake you have found the skin of. So first of all, these big scales you see right here, these are the ventral scale or the belly scales, and the snake uses that to be able to move around. They provide grip on any surface they are used to. And if we would count all the ventral scales on the entire body, that already gives us an indication of what kind of snake we're dealing with. Now, of course, size matters as well. You can see compared to my fingers, this is a fairly broad snake. It was quite a bulky snake. But usually you find a snake skin which is not complete. So you can't really count all those belly scales because they might not be available. We turn around, you see these are the scales on the back. We call them the dorsal scales. Now, if you look closely, you can at some point make out which one is the central line. Now, if we count from the edge of the belly scales, which are here, and we count 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., until we get to the middle, we have, for example, 10 scales. That means that there's on the other side, if we go in a V-shape back, up like that, there'll be 9 remaining, because there's always one scale in the middle. That means that this snake would have a scale count of 19 on the back. So, as the experts, we write that down, 19, because that already is an indication. Some snakes have a lot more, some have less. But that's not enough, because many snakes will have this kind of count, so we need more. Now, what else do we look at? This is a piece of the tail. You see, this was where the ending would be, and this is where it goes towards the ventral scales, the belly scales. Now, here we saw there's always just one belly scale here, right here. And in some snakes, these are really big, that helps us. And in some snakes, they're just very, very narrow, very small. In this snake, they're absolutely very big. But then we see here, this is the underside of the tail, this is the top side of the tail. Here. And here we can see that there's 1, 2 scales on the underside of the tail. And we call those the subcaudals, and the caudals is the shield that covers the anal area. Now, whether this is in 1, 2, or whether this is just 1 entirely, also gives us indication what kind of snake we're talking about. So we would like to see this part as well. And finally, the most important part, of course, is the head. If we don't have the head, it becomes a lot more difficult. Now, in this case, we have a very clear picture of the head. I'm going to bring it even a bit closer to you. What immediately is very striking is you can see actually on this the scale of the eye. Snakes don't have eyelashes, they have a protective membrane over the eye. So that's why snakes can't close their eyes, and you can never tell if a snake is asleep or not. Now, what do we look at? First of all, we look at the scale of these two, the size and the shape of these two scales. These are the parietals. Then we check the arrangement of all these scales. And then we look, and that is always very important, to how many little scales are there behind the eye. Those are the postoculars. Are there any scales here underneath the eye? These are the suboculars. And are there any scales in front of the eye, which are the preoculars? Then we look at, if available, in this case that's not the case, how many scales are there on the upper side, on the upper lip, the upper labials. We count how many there are. And if there's no scales under the eye, some of these labials might touch the eye. Now, then we need to know which ones they are and how many there are. All that gives us an indication of which snake we're talking about. Now, in this case, we can see there's 1, 2 scales behind the eye, there's one below, and there's a little one, and then there's here another one. Now, I already know that this is a snouted cobra, but then we also have to check, because there are 2 species which used to be subspecies of the Egyptian cobra, the Anchitas cobra and the snouted cobra. Now in this case it's very helpful that we can see the neck scales, which are relatively small and like what we would normally expect in a snake. If we would have the Anchitas cobra, these scales would be quite big, like at least 1.5 times the size of these, or maybe even 2 times the size of these. They're really big scales on the neck. But in the snouted cobra, these are small, like what we normally expect in a snake. So with all these counts together, we know that this was the skin of a snouted cobra.